Hi, this is Uwe, Delta Golf 2 Yankee Charlie Bravo. A new release of WSJT-X Improved is available for download. It brings some, I think, really interesting innovations for EME, but also for everyone there's something which could be interesting for you. So let's start. First, we optimized the color scheme of the cosine overlay feature. I hope you know that here in the view menu you can activate that here under cosines on waterfall, here with this checkbox, show decoded cosines. If this is enabled, then you see it as above here. Cosines of decoded stations are then overlaid to the waterfall. You have here a couple of setting options regarding persistence, font size, transparency, position, and so on. New is now that we optimized the color scheme, simplified it a bit if you like. CQ calls or stations calling 73 or Roger 73 if that option is enabled are now labeled with green background color. So if you see a cosine overlay with green background color, it signalizes this station is allowed to work. And then we added now full click to work functionality. In the other version it was just an overlay. Now here you can click on that, and if you click on that, then the cosine is copied, the grid, also the period, and so on. And you can now even double click on that to start a QSO with that station. Here in WSJT-X you have to have this whole TX frequency checkbox enabled, because we do not like to or do not want you to transmit on top of the other station. So this is now really intuitive, and yeah, brings a lot of more user friendliness, especially when you are on the VHF bands and there are only a few signals there. Then we introduced a couple of things which were requested by some users. One is that here on the reporting tab of the settings dialog, you can now select or specify the logbook locations. So if you have two operators in your family, or if you are a club station or so, you can assign here the logbook location to that specific WSJT-X instance, or of course also this is included in the configuration files. So if you have two users in your home, each of them could create here his or her own configuration file where this logbook location is then different. You could also use this feature if your logbook file is stored on a network drive or so. As said, this was requested by some users. Then we have extended here these possibilities for the highlight blue or orange feature. It is often used when you are looking for specific prefixes, or also more and more used if people want to have certain DXCCs highlighted. I mean, we have here in the filters these possibilities to highlight 4 specific DXCCs. However, if you like more of them to be highlighted or only parts of that, now you can use here also this feature. It is now allowed to specify single-digit prefixes, but if you do that, then it is of course helpful if you have also wildcards and exclusions available, and that's now the case. So for example, this combination K and then with a wildcard would highlight every stations beginning with K, but now you can then exclude, for example, stations from KH6 or KL or KP. So this gives you more possibilities to highlight certain stations according to your needs. Then there was an issue in CloudLog when you were at hotels or similar locations. We had a certain cases where the uploads were not coming through to CloudLog, our new technology, and shows now that the Wi-Fi in the hotel is no longer rejecting such messages. Yeah, then here this rig data feature, display power and SWR, and we thought it was good that also the ALC is now displayed, because of course ALC should not be too high. You have now even options here to highlight high ALC values by yellow or red color. So if you activate that, then it would be here highlighted. But even if it's just displayed, so let's press here tune, and you see here that now not only the SWR is displayed and the power, but also the ALC level is displayed in real time. Then a user requested this year if he accidentally clicked on a band button during transmission. This can of course be dangerous to some of your setups, and there's now the option, if this here is not enabled, if you don't have allow TX frequency changes while transmitting checked, then frequency changes by clicking on the band buttons is now prevented. So this is small, but perhaps for someone really helpful new feature. Yeah, then also these warnings like should you switch to ARRL field day mode or so is now a little bit adjusted in a more friendly way, that it comes only once per session. Yeah, then the MSK 144 mode is now more reliable. We had some stability improvements programmed here. And also programmed here this year, I fixed here some issues in this feature. For MSK 144 of a Q65 method, you can enable this option to transmit until 73 is received, and this now really works in a reliable way. Okay, and the last detail, which is relevant for contest stations or so. Jeff sent me a new feature where here you can temporarily inhibit the keying of the PTT because this is helpful if there's also SSB operation at the same time, or certain contests require that it is not allowed to transmit on that band by more than one station or so. This unfortunately only works here when you use DTR or RTS as your PTT method, so it does not work with CAT or VOX. Alright, but now let's come to the new features for EME operation. Yeah, first is this one. Lance is about to start his de-expedition on 6 meters from the Solomon Islands on the 28th of August. And on 6 meters, you likely know it is sometimes difficult that the propagation can change rapidly, because under some circumstances tropospheric propagation dominates, and then the signal is no longer coming to the moon. And so it was a great help, or would be a great help, if Lance knew which station actually received his signal more or less in real time. And we programmed such a feature. Unfortunately, I do not have moon visible here, so I cannot demonstrate it here live. But we needed for that a new reporting system, because the existing ones were not suitable for that. For that reason, Andreas established here, created a new liveCQ site which supports an extended protocol, because it is not enough to spot only CQ messages, but every message need to be spotted. And he implemented there also a special analyze algorithm. So here is the so-called pilot view. So if here a DEXpedition enters here call sign and specifies the TR periods, it could watch. Let's do it here. It could watch here the stations who received his signal in the actual cycle, or one back or two back or so. And yeah, the really innovation is now that this information is then in real time, or in near real time, then displayed here to LANs in this case. He sees the calling stations here in this active stations window, but look, when this is enabled, it now connects to Andreas' server. And when he then sees here the list of callers, that station, that callers which had actually received him, would be highlighted here with green backup color. This helps, of course, a lot and increases the QSO rate. Yeah, this feature will first be tested during the upcoming DEXpedition. Okay, then we thought about QMAP and MAP65. Well, we thought when we have developed such a nice cosine overlays and click-to-work functionality and all of that, couldn't we bring QMAP and later also MAP65 to such a level? So the answer is now a brand new QMAP version 1.0 and later also a brand new 4.0 version for MAP65. What is the difference? Or what are the differences? Let's start with QMAP. As said, at the moment I don't have moon here, so a live signal from the moon, so I can only show that here from the audio files. So let's load, for example, this one. Until now, the normal way of operation was that you see these messages in the active stations window. I think I have to reload it again. And that you then could click on the active stations window to make a QSO with this station. All right, this is still functional, but first we created an additional band map which can be activated or deactivated here. But then we thought, all right, why not fully implement this click-to-work functionality? And that is what we did. You can now click here on the in MAP65 on a message line, or on a cosine from the band map, or on a cosine overlay, and this is now automatically transferred to WSJT-X. So you have, when this is enabled, here you can disable it, full click-to-work functionality. So if I clicked here, for example, on that cosine overlay, it would start the QSO with this station. The cosine is copied, the DX grid, the period, and also the submode. So if I click, for example, whereas here this is a 30B signal, so if I click here on that, look, it switches automatically to 30B. So this is, of course, the next level of user-friendliness. It is an option, but we find it very helpful. And in addition to that, we now implemented also the option to start QMAP with an instance parameter. You know that from WSJT-X you can start it with the parameter --rig -name equal and then the rig name. And the same is now possible here for QMAP. So for the first time you can start QMAP with up to 4 different instances. You can assign a specific name here. here. When this is empty, then the displayed name is simply that what you specified in your --rigmanis name equal parameter. But here, for example, as this is the 1296 megahertz instance for me, I can specify it here, and if you click on OK, then it is displayed here, instance 1, with that label. This is also displayed here, so that you see which ones are paired, because this is now the next thing. If you are able to run more than 1 instances of WSJT-X and up to 4 instances of QMAP, you must of course be able to decide which instance is paired with which instance of QMAP, and that is now also possible. If you go here to the decode menu, you see here this box here, where you can specify which QMAP instance should be paired with this particular WSJT-X instance. If you don't want to pair anything, you can simply deactivate it here. And if you are running, let's say, 2 instances of QMAP and 2 or 3 instances of WSJT-X, for example, during contest, in some situations it could be helpful that only this particular instance of WSJT-X has the exclusive connection to QMAP, and for that purpose you find here this additional button. If this is pressed, then this particular WSJT-X instance claims the exclusive click-to-work rights for QMAP. Well, this is only needed if you are running 2 or 3 or 4 instances. All right, so far so good. Then we thought about MAP65. I mean, it's a really good program, but we all know it was developed some years ago, or many years ago. So we made a bit of brainstorming and asked ourselves, how would we design or specify MAP65 in the year 2026, when we would start from scratch again. And we came to the conclusion that we would no longer let MAP65 do the QSOs, because MAP65 doesn't have cut control, it doesn't have an auto sequencer for JT65. We would let MAP65 only do the ARIC thing and would use WSJT-X for making the QSOs for the entire transmission part. All right, then we thought, can't we implement something like that as an option, simply as an option? So this is now a new revolutionary approach how you could make your QSOs when using MAP65. When this is now, you have here in the view menu, first of all here, this option, double-clicking activates Enable TX, and then there's a new menu here which has the following entries: send data to WSJT-X, and the decision which of the 2 programs should be keyed regarding PTP. So if this is activated, then the entire QSO is being done in WSJT-X. So let's load again here a file, an audio file. And this is here a signal with multiple JT65 signals. Look, and there is now a connection between MAP65 and WSJT-X. You can click here on a message line, or here, or on a call sign overlay, and the parameters are transferred. And not only the parameters, but also the messages themselves, which is required if we let WSJT-X make the QSO. So if I, for example, like to start a QSO with this station here, let's click on a call sign overlay and look, the frequency is copied, the TRX period and so on and so on, and now I can start a QSO with that station. Of course, this makes only sense if your transceiver has a CAT control and is controlled by WSJT-X, because you need, of course, need to know the correct dial frequency. But this is now as easy as it is with QMAP. I can simulate a QSO even with the short messages. Let's, for example, assume Charlie is calling CQ. And if I double click it here, I would start a QSO now with Charlie. Look, and let's assume then the next message already receives, because here it is not that really important when it comes. Okay, so let's assume Charlie replies with TX2.
Calling you.
Look, then I see that here. And the autosequencer automatically jumps here to the Roger Oscar short message. And if then a Roger would receive from Charlie on the correct frequency, it is even that is recognized, and I would respond with 73. So it is now really fully functional that WSJT-X can be used to make the QSO. And MAP65 then works only as a receiver, wideband receiver. This is an option. This is a new revolutionary concept, how to make such QSOs. But to those of you whose first question is, how can I disable that? Yes, you can. First is disable here, double clicking on activates enable TX if you don't like that. And all you have to do is to deactivate these two checkboxes here, and then you have it the way you had it always. All right, then we thought about the color scheme here. Look, the original color scheme is this here, and at least people like me, it's very hard to read red color on foreground color on blue background color. Yes, it was always possible to change that with these spin boxes here, but we added this preset drop-down menu here. You can select between this classic, between white on blue, what I had shown you, and also between black and white. It has immediate effect if you click OK. So it is now really easy to change that. If you like to use your custom scheme, the possibility is still there. Default is white on blue. And then, last not least, we added here this experimental option to increase the sampling rate or sample rate to 192 kilohertz. This is something, you know, when there is no program supporting that, then there is no hardware supporting that. And when there is no hardware supporting that, then there is no software supporting. So somebody had to start, to do some innovation here. Lindrad, for example, at least with some sound cards, is theoretically able to give you or to provide a 4-channel wideband signal with 192 kilohertz. So for those of you who like to experiment with that, this option is now here available, but still the other options are fully available, and so this is purely optional. All right, one remark, we changed, like also Joe's version, we came to the conclusion that it is better to change the save directories for the program data here to app data, because the old bin directory does not work on Linux, and so they are really, it's better to do it here in the official location. It works for all operating systems. And for QMAP, it simply is required because when we have now more than one instances, then they have to have, of course, their separate ini files, and this can be done much better in the app data location. We have built in here a migration algorithm, so if you start the program for the very first time, your existing data will be copied so that you find exactly your data then also here at the new location, but from then on this new location is saved. And after request by at least one OM, we also added here a possibility to select or to specify the path to the call3 text file yourself. This makes sense for those operating on 2 meters EME. They can now have your specific call3 text file at one location and use it with several programs or the like. All right, I think that's all for today. So to summarize it again, this is the first release of the new 3.2 series. More features might be implemented in the near future, but this program is really good already. We were a little bit in a hurry because we wanted to support LANs with this new feature. That's the reason why this version is being released today. But don't underestimate these changes here to QMAP and MAP65. It was a lot that has been done under the hood. All right, 73, all the best. This was Delta Golf 2 Yankee Charlie Bravo.